The next element we're going to take a look at is pretty key, and we're going to do it in a way that you're probably familiar with from math class. So we're going to be working with some variables in this program. So create a C++ program with the file name constants. And we're going to work with, now that we know how to do user input, having the user enter some values, and then we'll do a formula and then give them some kind of result. So we're going to work with the circumference and area of a circle. So we'll set these up as integer variables. So you know what, for this, actually, we'll do double variables. That'll make more sense, because when we're doing the measurements, we may end up with a decimal value, so we want to make sure that we're using a variable type that can store those. So let's do a double for the radius of the circle. We're going to do a double for the circumference of the circle. This is a great opportunity to use a bit of an abbreviation so that you don't have to spell that whole thing out. I usually limit these to about 8 characters in length, and we'll do one for the area of the circle as well. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is we need to prompt the user for the output. And this is using a pretty straightforward style. So there's 4 steps to this program. So 1, declare variables. Those should always be at the top so that they're easy to find. The second thing that we're going to do is we are going to set our values. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to prompt the user for what the radius of the circle is. So we'll do cout, what is the circle's radius? And then put a colon there, and then we're going to use our input command cin radius, so that is going to be where they'll be typing that in. The third part of this process is going to be calculations. So there are a few things that we're going to calculate. We're going to be calculating the circumference and the area. So the circumference, and if you ever don't remember exactly how you spelled out the name of the variable, these little helpers are pretty useful. So I can just double click on that and it will appear. So the circumference gets the value of 2 times, we're going to use 3.14 as pi times the radius. Now the area is going to be pi r squared. So we're going to use 3.14 times the radius times the radius, because that will be squared. And then the last thing that we are going to do is we're going to display whatever result it was. So the first thing that we're going to do, we'll display the circumference as this, and then we'll display the area in the same way. Okay, so let's run our program and see what we've got. Okay, what is the circle's radius? I'm going to do a pretty easy one for this. I'm just going to do 10 because I already know roughly, what the circumference and the area are going to be. So for the circumference, 3.14 times 2 is 6.28 times 10 gives us the 62.8. So I know that that's a really good test value for this. Now, what we want to do is we want to enhance the readability of our program. So in this situation, what we're going to do is 3.14 is the value of pi, but we can make it easier to read by using a variable to store that value. And we're going to be doing this in a slightly different way. So normally we'll do double pi equals, I'm going to pick 3.14159 as the value. And normally this is how we would represent that, and then we would use that in our programming. However, most programming languages have a special way of declaring variables just for this instance. So what we're going to do is we're going to make a constant variable. And all we do when we're doing this, and I'll explain what constant is in just a second, the label or the name of the variable, we are going to write in all capitals. So let's put a couple notes here just so that we can see what the constant is for. Constant use. Number one, the label is in all caps. This makes it easy to distinguish constants from regular variables in your program. So imagine you hand this off and somebody thinks there's a value in your program that they can change, but it's important to the way that it runs that it remain constant. You're not going to have the value of pi change mid-program, so that's why we label it this way. And then we replace this with pi and pi. So you can see by using capital letters, even though it's a two-letter constant, it makes it stand out a little bit from the remainder of this. So number one rule is the label is written in all capital letters. Now, when do we use a constant? So this is, we'll go when. Number one, the value will not change. Number two, the value is known at the beginning. We don't have to calculate midway through our program what the value of pi is. We know that when we're running the program, and it's not going to change. And number three, and I'll give you an example of this, the value has a real world meaning. So 3.14 is a reference to the constant that we're going to be using for all of these calculations. Here's somewhere where you would not use a constant. So the number 2 here is because technically the circumference is pi times the diameter, which is 2 times the length of the radius. So in this situation, that is the function of 2, is it expands the radius to the length of the diameter. You would never want to do something like this, const double 2 equals 2, and then replace this with the word 2. Now I've just made my my program harder to read because we're used to seeing this formula like this. So yes, the value will not change. The value is known at the beginning, but this 2 doesn't really have a name we can give it to represent it in the real world, other than it's the number 2. So this is usually not a situation where we would use a constant. So anytime you get a value that will not change, we know it at the beginning of the program, and it has a real world meaning that we can name. You're going to set it up like this, and then give it a name that is in all capital letters.